Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me in this totally new environment. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that we're all here right now. Constant gratitude pouring out every second of the day. So, welcome to Monday. Welcome to the Daily Medicine Transmission. Welcome back to my subscribers and my consistent and dedicated viewing audience in our little cul-de-sac of reality over here. And if you're new to this channel, this is the first time you're here, regardless if you're on your YouTube, BitChute, or on Odysee. Welcome. It's great to have you here. And as always, whenever you interact with content that you truly appreciate on these platforms, it actually does make a difference to independent content creators like myself who have no sponsorship, who are not buying views or subscribers or have any bots necessarily joining this channel. So when you hit that like button, you subscribe to the channel, when you comment and you share, it actually does make a difference. So welcome to Monday. Thank you for being patient. Technical difficulties on every front imaginable. Considering the fact that Mercury is stationing direct today, you'd think that those things would iron themselves out right away. But of course, whenever any planet moves in, is making its transition and changing directions, right? Things have to slow down and then it has to build momentum to go back to the other direction, just like anything else. So not surprising. Also, there's no heat in my house. There's no furnace that will be working correctly until the end of the month. And my go-to furnace person, gosh, he's in the hospital and has been for weeks. So I have to move out into the living room and build a fire in the wood stove. And this is kind of where we've been congregating for now that the weather has truly changed and shifted, and getting ready for our sun's ingress into Scorpio into that time of the year. So technically we are in fall or autumn here in the northern hemisphere. But once the sun moves into Scorpio, I think that's really going to signal and which is just a matter of days, right? Just a matter of days that the sun moves into Scorpio. So I'm in a different environment. The cats are, playfully romping around, as you will probably see and hear. And I have the fire right here next to me. So I appreciate your patience with everything having to be reorganized. And it's Monday. You know how it goes with Monday. It's like trying to get yourself back into the flow of, if you're on that 5-day Monday through Friday work week. Not everybody is. I spent a long time in the very long time in the service industry, and especially working jobs where there's no such thing as a weekend necessarily. So whatever your weekend is, it takes always a little while to get back into the zone of your work week. So I appreciate that too, as well. There's a lot going on. So Jupiter, Mercury stationed direct today. The moon is now officially in Aries. There is, how was the weekend? We had the sun in that square to Pluto yesterday, the moon in Pisces. If you haven't checked out the astrology report for this coming week and the full moon in general, you can check that out just scroll back or scroll down. You'll find it for the astrology report for the full moon and for Jupiter and Mercury stationing direct. So things are going to start, they've already started moving forward. We've talked about this before. The larger planets, the transpersonal planets that are out there, when they station direct, especially something like Pluto, it takes a little while to gain the momentum, get warmed up. If you've ever used a large piece of equipment, it takes a while for it to warm up and really be capable of moving. If you've ever used any kind of combustion engine equipment, I spent a long time in landscaping, so I'm very familiar with how these two-stroke engines work on the daily. And we've talked about this before, right? You need fuel, you need spark, and you need air. And until that engine is properly warmed up, you can't really put a lot of air into the system because it will it'll just stall it, which is very interesting because we do have hot air with Jupiter representing that hot air, that expansive higher mind, right? That is brought about by the friction of opposing viewpoints, opposite poles, right? The friction that comes that actually starts the catalyzing reaction or the chemical reaction that's started by a catalyst. And Mercury stationing direct in an air sign. Here is the injection of the air into our system right now, and certainly what happens when air gets warm, right? It expands. So there's lots of different ways that we can look at all of this energy today. But what I do, the general theme that's coming around, and the desire of all nations, is very connected to the astrology, specifically the constellation where Mercury is right now, and I'm going to go into all of that. Actually, I'm going to go out of studio mode here. I'm going to go into all of that today because you can see in the imagery that it seems pretty familiar to many different mythologies, cultural context, religions, right? The mother and the child. So, and the desire of all nations, and with this large body of knowledge and information that is coming through now that Mercury is direct, it's going to be coming through now, right? And Jupiter stationing direct is our advocate. It's like the Jupiter is the lawyer and Mercury is the paralegal, right? And just funneling all the information, doing all of the research and applying that to an actual experience of peace and balance and justice. We are talking about Libra after all, the scales of justice that are embedded in our entire justice system, and the imagery of the scales of Libra embedded in our, the symbol of our justice system, right? Balance and fairness, that is the result of keeping a society or social context free and balanced and fair and peaceful, right? So that's what we're really applying. But remember, with this particular degree of Libra here, we are dealing with a very vast amount of information that needs to somehow be instructed, released, projected outwards. And when we start thinking about it in terms of birthing, right? I mean, the birth canal is only so big, and it will stretch to allow for the birthing process to come, to be enacted, but it's not comfortable. And I do feel in what's coming through with my own in my own intuition, what we're going to see in the reading today, especially, it's going to look pretty dire on the surface. And a lot of the energy has been like that recently, that we really do have to see the bigger picture and think many steps ahead, and realize the difficult process that that is hand in hand with birthing this new earth, right? And one of the things that was communicated to me when I finally got my starseed confirmation from that reading was this idea of being the midwife of the birthing of the new earth. And you can have a midwife, you can have a doula, you can have all of these aspects to prepare you for this process, but nothing is going to take away the very real labor pains of this process. And there is a tendency right now, I'm feeling like a very hasty tendency, and as we're going to see in the reading, that we have to see that these very large changes that are coming, that are here, that are being birthed into existence right now. And of course, we talked about Saturn, right? Saturn in a 70 degrees Aquarius, the cosmic egg breaking open, right? There is a labor process, and it's frustrating. And it also is very tempting to want to move forward quickly in order to get through it, in order to bypass the difficult process of going through it. And certainly too, a lot of what we're experiencing is in fact going to be, and has been for a while, mitigated in order to control for the outcome. And that's something to keep in mind too. And this is why hasty decisions are something that we shouldn't make right now, right? And there will be lots of opportunities to want to be hasty or to move quickly through a healing process that needs a lot of time in order to go through. And there will continue to be exits, of course. And there's a very famous one, right? There's a very large political figure that's in the news right now that's passed away as a result of complications of the coup. So there's a reason. There's always a reason. If it's splashed all over the mainstream news, there's always a reason that it's put up there for some benefit that's other than just being objective information, unfortunately. So lots going on this week. Of course, we have the full moon on Wednesday. We've talked about that. We'll have a transmission that day to see kind of like where things are sitting in terms of that energy in particular, right? Because it's like the timeline itself is shifting and changing and molding because it's always in relationship to everybody who is interacting with it right now. So it does change, it does shift. It's a dynamic process, just like the archetype of Libra is a dynamic process that requires us to be participating and applying our knowledge of ourselves at every given moment. And so it is changing. The outcome of where we are going is not changing. Right? The event horizon has been reached, right? We're all going to go into this black hole of experience, whatever you want to call it, together. And how we pop out on the other side and how we experience it right now that will determine how we pop out the other side is really what's changing and morphing and what is dynamic. There are fixed points in time that we travel to, but the pathways that we go on those fixed, to get to those fixed points in time that is very much expressed through the astrological clock, right? Which is real, the astronomy and the astrology too is very much just a timepiece, right? How we get there to these fixed points in time, as I've talked about endlessly, it feels like, is always up to us. And we're going to see in today's reading, especially how that experience of what comes out the other side is really is going to be impacted by our relationship to it, right? I mean, we are a point in time and space. That's what it means to be incarnate. And so we're not separated. And this is where it comes into this worshiping of time, this worshiping of Saturn, for instance. Saturn represents the time clock, right? In a very material way, that there is, in fact, time and space that we are a fixed point in that is also expressing itself at every given moment. When you can't get past the material, when that is what you worship, and make no mistake, the nature worship, you can revere nature, you can love nature, you can acknowledge that we're all part of nature, but when you start worshiping nature as the creative force of the universe, this is where things get tricky, isn't it? And I've struggled with this quite a bit, being and I feel like that many of the Pleiadian and Sirian starseeds in particular will also struggle with making sense of this, because the indigenous realized that we are no different from nature, but they also realized that nature was not the creative force of the universe, but is the machinery of the, put into place by whatever the creative force of the universe is. So when you worship nature, right? Nature, that does put you in a position where you are in fact worshiping the time clock itself. And Saturn, this is where all of this imagery comes in about the black cube and the black stone, and what all of that represents from a symbolic standpoint, from the perspective of the mystery schools and all of that, what that represents. And if you have not listened to the entire series of Bill Cooper's The Hour of the Time, I'm going to post the playlist that's on YouTube, on social media today. And if you're interested in a rabbit hole, it's not even a rabbit hole. If you're interested in binging something amazing that will teach you everything you need to know about where the, this whole concept comes from, this is where it's at, right? And I listened to this in its entirety about a year ago, and it was one of the things that flipped my lid, thankfully, and flipped my perspective in a way that was desperately needed at that time, because I was pretty lost. And not listening to my intuition. So, and listening to intuition, this is an important thing to consider. So we are part of time, we are part of space, we are part of nature, we are inseparable from it. But when that is where you put your worship, then yeah, there's going to be a specific set of circumstances that you're going to be drawn to, and will you find yourself also wanting to do things like putting all of the there's so many things around this that I can't really go into, or we'll just be here forever. So I just wanted to drop a little nuggets of information about these things to those who are interested and understand why it's important to get deeper into these perspectives. And if you're really attached to the nature worship of things, and you don't see how that is problematic, it's okay. It's just everybody's on their own trajectory, everybody's on their own timeline in some ways, right? Everybody is in a different place of this. They're riding out this time wave, and things will come to you when they do. But I'm just explaining to you, those who are in charge of this very, very physical world, this is their focus, and it determines so much of where they put their energy and attention, right? So just some things to consider. Speaking of the world, let's look at some things, right? The Schumann has been pretty mellow, and so has the sun. There is solar weather that certainly made itself known over the weekend, but at the same time, let's see here. I want to show you some activity. Whoo boy. Let's make sure that this is here. So I hope everyone is doing well, taking care of themselves today. As much as they can. All right, so what we're looking at here is today's earthquake activity. Also, too, just to point out that La Palma, it's still pretty active. And if you don't know where La Palma is, I'm gonna show you here on this chart real quick. There we go. It's over here in this area. So it's definitely on a fault line, right in the Canary Islands, right here. So what's very interesting is that none of this is registering on here, even though they are earthquakes that are large enough to register on here, right? And so I find that really interesting, but it would be right here. So let's just look at things today. So as we're going to see here, Russia, right? 5.3 earthquake. This area, this is big, 6.1. There's been a lot right here. And if you aren't familiar, this is in fact the Ring of Fire, this right here, which you can see Pacific Northwest is part of. You can see the subduction zone that's right here off of the Ring of Fire. Here's Alaska. So we see a lot of activity just around there in general. And there's smaller quakes certainly all over the place, but I'm showing you the big ones that register over 4 on the Richter scale. See, here's Indonesia, here's the Fiji Islands, here is Taiwan right here as we go through it. And of course there's smaller ones, Hawaii, and we know that there are volcano activity. There's government camp, we know where that is. That's Mount Hood, my friends. 2.5. I mean, it's not unusual for that to be happening. Japan, 4.6. That's probably had an impact. So you see that Alaska, California, China, right? They had a 4.5 in China. Hawaii again, Japan again. This is all today, last night into today. This is up here near Iceland. Oh, that's fascinating. That's Redlands, California, Northern California, Afghanistan. That's kind of off the beaten path, but there's been quite a few quakes over in that area. Look at this. Alaska, Russia again. Right here. So you see that this ring of fire is pretty active these days. Here's another one along that. Japan, Russia, Indonesia. Okay, so you can see that the activity, there's a lot of movement on the top end of this ring of fire right now. So I don't know, just something to keep in mind as we go through life in general. But the solar weather, I mean, we're getting that coronal hole stream, so of course the speed and the density and stuff is going to speed up, but we're not really going to get, and there's a CME that was, I don't think there was a CME that was necessarily released. I have to go back and look. So we're going to look at today's reading. I just want to check in with the chat. Nature is but an earthly thing. Oh, that is an interesting... Yeah, nature is, right? I see what you're saying, Alex, totally. Nature is but an earthly thing, right? I mean, nature is... I mean, the natural world and natural law certainly exists as far as astrophysicists are able to determine. These same natural processes exist throughout the entire universe, as far as we know. Like the very basics of chemistry and physics exist all through the universe. And so nature is absolutely, and I would say it's a terrestrial thing, right? Or it is a physical thing. It is in the physical universe, but the nature is not what brought about our physical universe. So that's something to consider. But there is a sacred imperative to life. Where did that come from? I mean, our DNA is so brilliantly crafted as blueprints for biological growth. I mean, it's remarkable if you start digging deeper into what DNA is. But when you start worshiping that aspect as if it is, in fact, the essence of the what brought about this beautiful machinery, if you want to call it that, whatever it is, then that's where you also, because it's nature has. I'm gonna post something else that came across my pathway in the last couple days. It's just like a little 6-minute reference to one of the North American indigenous clan leaders talking about it. And one of the things he said was, nature has no mercy. Right? Natural law is natural law. There's no mercy to nature. It just is. And so that's something to consider as well. Anyway, thanks for your comment, Alex. I appreciate you being part of this process. So let's start looking at this reading for today as we... All right. Well, of course, here's our tower moment again. And, the more we see the tower, the less I guess we could say, the less scary it appears to be. But let's see, I'm opening my notes here. So sudden breakout of realizations, of course. There's a lot of suddenness, destruction of old values, of course. And oops, let me do this real quick. Destruction of old values, sudden breakout of realization. We're talking about Uranus. We're talking about Saturn, of course, as well, because these two things together, they, Uranus is the foe of Saturn, that's for sure. Because Uranus is the ruling planet of Aquarius. Aquarius exists outside of time and space. Like Saturn is, in fact, the wall, right? It is time. It is the ticking of the clock. It is the wall of material reality, right? But Uranus, as the ruler of Aquarius, represents something that is more than that, right? It is more than that. And when these two come together, it is the fact that the colliding of these aspects is what kind of breaks us out of the trance of being totally entrenched in material reality. Now, some people would call that being entrenched in 3D. But I would even argue that, you know, everything, even the 4D aspect, you are still operating within the aspect of space-time, because 4D is, in my experience of it, is in fact traveling. I mean, you're able to exit the body, for instance, like astral travel, and travel through time, right? Because the fourth dimension is the traveling through time, but you're still here. You're still here. Anyway, a good step forward sometimes requires a kick in the ass. And so the tower is, and who's the agent of the tower? It's Mars. Where's Mars today? Well, it's in conjunction with Spica. It's going to be in an exact trine with a direct Jupiter today. And so what did we talk about with Spica? It is resources. It is the riches and the value and the wealth that we accumulate through our own labor that we then turn and offer to those that we are committed to in either whatever type of relationship Libra would represent. It is the offering of such. And so Mars doing it with haste, right? Doing it with some courage and some bravery and some bravado, right? Mars is the agent of the tower. And so in some ways, it's like this, it's very forceful of this giving, right? This giving of resources of our own labor, and pushing it almost, you know what I mean? I mean, this is fire breathing dragon. You see we talked about this many times. And of course the tower is 1 + 6, it's 16. So there's a 7, there's 3 7s in, this reading. And if you count the 1 of keys and the 6 of forces, that's 4 7s, honestly. And then we have an 11. So there's a lot of this fall from grace energy, this fall from stability that the 7 represents, that makes it a divine number in some ways, because it's the first prime number other than 1, right? It is indivisible by anything other than itself and 1. And so it provides for the divine intervention, because it is losing all of that stability in that moment. But there's a hastiness here. There's a forcefulness that the tower represents, because it's built on hubris, right? It's built on this idea that our intellect and our ego structure alone is able to build that tower to heaven, which is, a false pretense. But in some ways, we have to go through the process of this in order to realize that. And so the sudden kick in the ass is, the tower just, finally wavering and falling over. And you can go into all of that. You dig deep into the biblical references to the Tower of Babel and Nimrod and Nebuchadnezzar and all that. That's for you to do on your own. This is saying that this causal factor coming into this moment here is this breakout of sudden realizations, and that's happening in many different ways. Of course, I mean, people are certainly opening their eyes every moment, and it's coming to us in a very personal and direct way, especially now with Jupiter and Mercury stationing direct. I mean, these aspects are being brought right to those engines are turning on too, especially Mercury, because it rules the mind and our nervous system and our conceptualization of the reality that is immediately around us, how our nervous system and our brain actually processes information and then puts it back out there. How we make sense of the material world around us is that third house and Mercury. And so in an air sign, it's definitely working with that element, and things are going to start moving forward. And when we talk about Mercury in particular, I'll show you the constellation and how it's connected to some sort of birthing process, which is a very Virgo thing as well. But it's about applying that into the social context, right? That is what Libra represents. So we see here that coming into the moment is in fact that tower moment. And that could have already happened for people. And I can point to specific things in my personal life and other people who are close to me where this tower has already happened, right? And now we find ourselves And I'm not suggesting that it won't happen again, right? We're always in this like this spiral loop and coming back around. And with Jupiter and Mercury stationing direct today and a moon in Aries, right? It's certainly going to be brought forward. But we did have the sun in that square to Pluto yesterday. Right, we talked about that too. The sun was still in conjunction with Arcturus, right? And the Arcturian nature that is holding the wisdom and the, excuse me, the keys to the how to be at balance and peace in the universe. In a square to the very real destructive element, which is represented in a lot of ways to the tower, because it is the destruction in and of itself and the impact of the destruction, not so much the destructive element itself, which is the agent of Mars or that fire or that spark, but it is the experience of it, the power that it actually has in order to allow us to participate in metamorphosis. I don't know what the verb would be for that, but as we move into this current moment here, or the heart of the matter, sorry, wrong button. We look here at the heart of the matter is the Knight of Discs. So look at this, fire and earth, the Knight of Discs. So there's certainly this card represents us really wanting to step into a role as provider of material resources. So the Knight often is industrious and patient and clever, very clever in material matters, right? The Knight is the fire element, is more dedicated to making rather than thinking. So the energy of the Knight is much more into the process of cultivation, of providing, of doing the work out in the field and with the material realm. And so success results from pragmatism and instinct with this card. Now, the downside to the Knight of Discs, because they all have them, every card does, especially these court cards, because they do represent us as people. On the dark side, it shows that there's an inability to really put anybody else's interests ahead of our own, right? To be really hyper focused on what we are cultivating, what we are building, what we are harvesting, whatever part of the cycle we are engaged in terms of the material realm. And there's a striving for material success and wealth. And that's not in and of itself a terrible thing. But again, when you see that the fire of the Knight is hyper-focused on what we are trying to build for ourselves, it really is hard to see beyond our own personal gain, right? Again, there's that Mars element. And it's very strong and enduring, right? There's a lot of pragmatism, like I said. There's industriousness and there's patience. There's patience, okay? Keep that in mind, that at the heart here, we have something within us that we can embody that's very important, which is the patience and the energy to fulfill all of the steps in order to bring about what it is we are trying to build or create or cultivate in a material way as a provider. So again, it's not about thinking, it's about doing. And the nodes shifting into Taurus and Scorpio in January are going to change our karmic journey quite a bit into a much more feeling-based experience rather than a mind experience. All right, so this is something to consider, that we're holding both sides of this right now. And the causal factor coming into this moment at the heart of us was this tower moment in some way, shape, or form, or is to come, right, with Jupiter and Mercury. But I would say that it's already transpired, and now whatever it is for us, and now we are here embodying this role as someone who is ready to put some things into form in order to work with the physical form in a way that is very industrious and patient and strong and enduring, right? We have the fire in our soul that is acting and pushing and sustaining us as we work on the material realm, right? We have to actually care about what's happening with boots on the ground without worshiping that situation, to actually be part of the process. Now, where things get this is where it gets important to not be hasty. We're going to see here how this is shown to us. So the one of keys is the architect, right? That we have the power and the ability and the authority to shape our own reality. That our blueprint that is in front of us is something that we can actively put into physical 3D form, right? It's not just, if you think of your DNA, for instance, is a blueprint. We, through our choices, through our action, through our focus, are able to actually build that actual whatever it is. Oh, my nose is so itchy. I'm so sorry, guys. Into an actual physical form that represents more than just the blueprint on the page. So when it's reversed like this, in terms of where we're drawing our power from in a very material way, it's talking about how plans have changed, or things have fallen through, or there are things that we can't control right now that are part of this experience. And losing your belief in your own ability to shape your reality and to be more than just the 2D blueprint. That epigenetics is just as much a part of the conversation as genetics. And it's time to wake up to our personal power and work the plan. Work the plan. What is the plan? Well, the plan is more than what we each individually think that we want for ourselves. Again, if you think about just what we want, then the labor of birth, I mean, we would turn it off immediately, right? Because we're like, this is unbearable and really painful. We have to think about what is coming as a result. And if the plan is in a state of collapse, whatever it is, it's time to start a new one. So that's also a possibility, that things may have finalized themselves in a way. People have exited. Situations have completely found themselves ending. So it's time to take from there and start building again, right? What does Pluto do? It destroys in order to create something new. But if we're drawing our power from a place of lack, or focus on the fact that we can't, or we think we can't create from this place, that or if things are out of control, right? If we lose our belief in our own ability to do this, then you can see here how we will end up in a place of failure, especially if we move too hastily, because we are really hyper focused on what's not working, what has fallen through, why I'm not healing, why things aren't going faster, why isn't it happening along this particular timeline that I want. And especially when you're at the heart here, you have all of this ambition and energy, and you want to harness what has fallen through, or that tower moment, right? You feel that, on some level, with Mars in conjunction with Spica, there is something there to be offered, and there's something there to be gained and to be given at the same time. Like, we feel it and we want to act on it really strongly. But if we are grabbing from a place where we're like, we actually aren't in control, or things are not going the way that I intended, this is where we start really leaking power, or losing power in some ways. So along with that, we're going to find here that where we release our energy with all of this, we're drawing our energy from that architect reverse. Here's the 7 of Scrolls reverse. Here's our other 7. Our second 7 is intricacies and industries. We have talked about this so many times, this particular card. So having it reversed, things are not moving fast enough for you. They're too urgent, too attached to the outcome. Don't want to deal with the particulars or all of the intricacies, right? All of the details that require us to build something massive, right? Again, if you want to birth something new, you actually have to go through the labor pains, or whatever the process is, not to diminish people who have not given birth naturally, right? Lots of people have been birthed or give birth through C-section, for instance, but you still have to go through a process to do that, right? And what comes out of that. We don't want to deal with the particulars. We're too urgent, too attached to the outcome. It's important that we don't act in haste, because, you measure twice and you cut once. You don't measure appropriately, or you measure wrongly, or you don't measure at all because you're too fast and you want to go through this process. Then it's not going to be right. It's not going to be balanced. It's going to be crooked. It's not going to hold up. So if you're not willing to be patient with the process and attend to the details, then what you're seeking is going to collapse without ever even coming to fruition. Again, this is really, really clear right now that we have to find our stability and our polarity of power, right? That vertical axis, especially at the heart of things, that has all of this ambition and energy, and honestly has all of these wealth and resources from Spica given to this warrior fire energy within all of us that really wants to, apply it to this social context and find peace and justice and balance. We can't move too quickly. We can't be totally ambitious. And sometimes we have to accept that there are very sudden changes that are outside of our control. Okay. That is something that comes in with Pluto and of course this tower moment. So there's things that we can't control. Okay. And we know that, but if we start gathering our power based on that, again, this is where worshiping nature comes back around, because if we are relying on our ability to control what is around us, then we're in trouble, because we're not going to be able to control. And again, just like that, the leader of the Wolf Clan, I can't remember his name. I'll post the video. It's only a couple minutes and it was very insightful. Nature has no mercy. So we have to be plugged into our own ability in some ways to move through this process. And we can't be attached to the outcome, and we can't be hasty about it. We need to make sure that every aspect is taken care of and every detail is attended to. It has to. Otherwise, here's our dramatic outcome is failure, right? Saturn in Taurus. Saturn in Taurus, another seven, of course. And of course, Crowley being so absolutely dramatic about everything. It's the fall from paradise into the abyss of fate, right? Hopes deceived and crushed, false success with no lasting benefit, cost more than has been gained. Oh, there's a lot of things we can look at right now out on the world stage that will fit that bill, and has been for the last year and a half, if not longer. I mean, once we hit March of 2022, it'll have been 2 years since the 15 days to stop the spread. So now here is the benefit, all right, that you can silently watch and reflect and get deeper insights into the coherences. This is a moment here, even though Mercury stations direct, it's not going to shoot off right away. It's still at this standstill, right? And so we can be at that standstill, watching, reflecting, getting deeper insights, right? Instead of being resigned to act quickly or feel like a victim to what's happening and be impatient. The light potential of this card and of this archetype is the ability to wait. Now, let's show you real quick. Again, dramatic, right? Crowley's so dramatic. So let's look at the Rider-Waite deck just real quick, right? This is a totally different energy, seemingly, which is sitting back and waiting, looking at what has been brought forward, what we have cultivated so far. And if it's based on, if we harvest it too quickly, it's not going to be ripe. And that's something to consider as well. So you see that this person is kind of leaning on their tool. They are looking at what has developed so far, and really taking stock of it and taking the opportunity to be patient, to wait, to see what's here. And if we push forward when we're not supposed to, then yes, we do get failure. Right? We do get failure. And the Saturn in Taurus, right? The inevitable time clock of the material world has to be addressed. And so, again, we have to be patient. And I'm not suggesting that we don't do things. We should be doing things every day, but we're doing things from an energetic perspective and position in order to not fail, in order to be able to cultivate and to reap what we have sown and cultivated in terms of what is working and what is good, but it's not going to be that way if we don't, if we're not patient in some ways, right? And it's hard when the tower's here because it's chaotic, it's crazy, it flips everything around, it makes people want to act out. And so that's something to consider as well. Now, there's some great guidance here that really speaks to this. Number one, when it comes to that architect, what are you here to do? The Ark of the Covenant, right? The 11. This is master number here. Living true to your karmic contract. This is about facing lessons of growth and working towards greater discoveries, right? What are we here to do? I mean, if we're here to really just satisfy our immediate moment here, then we're not thinking about the big picture. We're not thinking about 7 generations ahead. We're not thinking about what is our role in this larger process. If we get so hyper fixated on what I want right now, that's going to appease my sense of comfort. Taking a rest doesn't break your covenant. That's another thing to consider. Look at these guys. They're taking a break. They have a fire. The ark is right here. Now, this is not to say we shouldn't be doing things, but again, patience, patiently waiting, right? Knowing that it's important to know that just because you take a break, and we talked about this whole lunar cycle, because it's going to be very brought forward with the full moon, right? We talked about that too, about how there's going to be a very bold expression, right? A bold expression of disappointment, and also in ourselves and other people. And the flip side of that is our ability to take in that bold expression, to be responsible for how things impact other people. We have to be aware of that as well. We can't just keep screaming out when things make us uncomfortable. We have to look at the big picture, and that is part of our karmic growth and our karmic contract. So consider that in terms of your power for creating the reality that you want to live in and your ability to do so. When things don't go the way that you want them to, we have to be able to still stay connected to that very, very powerful source of creation and that architect, that inner architect within us, and realize, what we're here to do, right? And be strong in that. Now, the tiger is very awesome because it really does suggest, about leadership. Trust that you're capable of doing so, but very specifically, this card says know when to advance and when to yield, okay? When to yield. I'm not suggesting we should yield anything of our personal power. In fact, the opposite. But if things aren't going the way that you want and you are trying to push ahead in order to mitigate your own discomfort or have to somehow bypass the very real labor pains of New Earth, then maybe yielding to that, relaxing to that process, trusting that process and trusting your ability to do so is really what this is about. And I'm not suggesting, again, it's not about yielding personal power. It's yielding to a much larger process and knowing that that is also a sign of leadership as well as acting in that moment. And when we move up to here, the camel, trust that you have the resources to get through the challenges before you. And what are those resources? They're emotional and intuitive and feeling-based resources. Because look at here, the waterfall, the 6 of forces, right? That our emotions and our intuitive and feeling-based landscape will literally change the landscape, the physical landscape. It's not so much about the fire, although that's important, but it's going to be our own emotional intact, being emotionally intact and powerful that's going to make a difference, right? And when we're trying to rush through things, when we are trying to act exclusively through things, this is where our haste and our ambition can go awry. And it's taught, we have everything that we need. It's within us, right, to get through this journey. And it's so powerful. And this can help with our finding some patience to work on the actual mundane details or the ability to stay to focus on the mundane details. Oh my God, I just had a flashback to Office Space. If you, that part of the movie towards the end where they discover that the program, the virus that they implanted into Initech's system totally backfired, and they stole a lot more money over, 2 days. And Michael Bolton is like yelling at the main character. No, it's the other way. Peter's yelling at Michael Bolton, who was the one that engineered the software. And he's like, this is not a mundane detail. Yeah, make sure the decimal place is put where it needs to be, right? Because otherwise you just become an agent of somebody else's very well thought out agenda, although they are running out of options at this point. But everything we need is within us, everything, right? And it's so powerful that if we release it before it's time, or if we release it too soon, before things are ready to really, have the strength and the capacity to hold it, we could really do some damage. And again, that's where that failure comes in. So patience, being willing to focus on each detail, as mundane as it seems, to give ourselves the opportunity to heal, and let the body do what it's meant to do, that it's designed to do. I'm thinking about my dad in particular. He's really anxious to get out of the hospital. And it's like, they're not anxious to discharge him because they want to know his lung's not going to collapse when they discharge him, and he's anxious, right? And so again, give yourself the time to really build up the stamina, the healing. Let the natural process do what it's going to do. Otherwise, you do risk like harvesting too soon and causing some serious problems. So that's today's reading. We're going to look at God, there's like cat hair all over me. I think that's why I'm like just scratching my nose constantly. All right, guys, let's see here. We're going to move on to first we're going to look at this. Actually, we'll look at the chart first. We'll look at the chart first because I want to end with that. Here's our chart for today, my friends. I'm going to move myself over here. Oops. Thanks for being patient with my technical difficulties that seem to never end. This is why I don't feel justified in charging anybody or asking for a subscription yet, because it's just like, I just so not with it at all. Okay. Here is our chart for today, my friends. And so we are, in fact, looking at our moon in Aries right now. And we're going to see here that the sun is still in a conjunction with Arcturus. We now have Mars in conjunction with Spica. Jupiter is technically stationing direct right now, so it's stopped moving retrograde. Mercury is technically not as of right this moment, so it's still retrograde. It's still technically retrograde right now. It's coming to a standstill, that's for sure. And our moon is in Aries. As you can see, it's going to make a sextile to Rahu. There'll be a trine to Ketu. And where we're finding Venus today is very important. And we're going to talk a lot about that because she is at the degree that we will find the solar eclipse in December at. And this is a very important degree. It's probably one of the most difficult degrees, I feel like, in the zodiac, personally. It's 13 degrees, 12 to 13 degrees of Sagittarius. So, okay, that's not what I want to look at. Here we go. There's not a ton of transits today, but there are a couple, and we'll talk about those, and then we'll talk about more of the. So what we're going to find here is that Jupiter stationed direct while the moon was still in Pisces. So how were people's dreams this weekend? How was all of that moon in Pisces over the weekend? I thought it was pretty interesting, just being totally submerged in the full experience of everything. Now with the moon in Aries, of course, there's always the potential for flared emotions, hot tempers, really bold, explosive expressions of emotion that then snap back just as easily, right? With all of that Aries energy, it's always the spark and the spark and the spark, right? Mars is just bam, out. So there's certainly that opportunity, or I wouldn't even say opportunity. You can channel that if you want, but it's going to come through pretty strongly anyway. So the first thing I want to point out is the 3 degrees of Aries, right? Just like in every sign, the 3rd degree represents that first structural integration of the duality that exists within that particular sign. So 3 degrees of Aries is an individual whose cameo profile is in the shape of the nation they live in. And so it's very simply in that moment where we, as a consciousness, as an ego consciousness, a very basic ego consciousness, it's about participating in something more than yourself. Okay, so this goes very much into, hello kitty, this very much goes into the into this whole theme today. And so in the trine to Rahu, right, the 3 degrees, or Ketu, I'm sorry, 3 degrees of Sagittarius, we can, without doing anything, find some sort of balance and structural foundational support, this fire trine with Ketu, about the ritualization of the conflict, right? Because this represents ultimately the use of the Hegelian dialectic in order to control something at a social level. Because Sagittarius is about the social values, the social belief systems, the larger collective paradigm. So this south node of where we've been in the past. Hi, kitty, you want to come up? Where we've been in the past. Hold on. Sorry. This is Mr. Wants Attention. So where we've been in the past, right, is and where we can, I guess not, the Hegelian dialectic being used, problem, reaction, and then the solution, right? The problem, the reaction, and then they come together on the chessboard, and then you get the solution. This is where K2 is. We've been here. We've already done this. And in fact, this should really give us a sense of the fact that we have done this, giving us on a soul level an ability to tap in and recognize it when it's happening. So we can identify, each of us having this very personalized and emotional and feeling-based experience in this moment of identifying ourselves with the larger context, right? The larger context of this, right? Without having to do anything. And many people will, right? They will identify themselves with the constant conflict, and the ritualization of it in order to create something new, which is very much about the Great Reset. And again, this Hegelian dialectic in order to create a solution that then will be something that the entire collective is meant to attach to, right? Again, this is where we've been. This is what we're heading away from. This is the tail of the dragon, okay? And we won't have to do anything. And many people will find themselves at an emotional and an intuitive level, identifying themselves with the greater life that has to do with this constant back and forth. And it still exists, right versus left. It's still there. Republican, Democrat, it's still there, even down to gender, sexual identity, right? Even down to those base things, it's still there. Race, specifically the poles of race, not taking into account the multi-layered experience of race and ethnicity. No, just the two, right? And you see how when they're pitted against each other, how it allows for something new to be created. Now, where we can actually reconcile this and leave ourselves open to something totally new is in the sextile to Rahu. So again, just basic knowledge and information, right? The 3 degrees of Gemini is this intellectual crystallization of dual concepts. It's not about creating anything new. It is about bringing these aspects together into something that is structurally sound from a mental and rational and empirical perspective, right? Just knowledge. That's all it is. So we can apply this knowledge or the expression of what is, or truth, or information, or data, or empirical knowledge, we can apply that and invest our selves emotionally, our own ego consciousness, and a sense of subjective self. We can invest that into, an intellectual crystallization of what is, right, of information and knowledge, right? And that's certainly not nearly as exciting as the conflict that gets created as a result of the dual purpose and the friction that's created. That's way more exciting, right? That's why, Sagittarius is the higher mind, right? When you get the synthesis and the aha moments and the dissertation and the conclusion that is drawn from that, of the experience of Sagittarius. It's way more exciting. Gemini is not exciting. It just is, right? It is just the accumulation of facts. And we can really apply how our subjective experience with the moon in Aries right now to this, reconcile those opposites in order to find ourselves open to a whole new, the full range of direction, right? But it requires us to participate in it, right? And so that's going to be the hard part, because again, it's way more exciting and motivating and arousing in some ways to get something out of the problem, reaction, solution, and identify ourselves with that particular trajectory, if that makes sense. But remember, K2 is where we're heading away from. Rahu is where we're going karmically. So again, we want to be on the head of that dragon. We want to be riding that bitch and like directing the course of it with our own, especially with the moon in Aries. Like, we want to make sure that we are putting that energy of Mars and this Aries moon in that direction. But it requires that we actually do it. We have to. In order to actually get the harmonious reconciliation out of that sextile. Now, what happens after that is the moon actually comes into another sextile with Saturn in Aquarius. So another sextile with Aries moon and the cosmic egg, right? And so this is, again, the first realization of the dual nature of us. This is 7 degrees of Aries, and a person succeeds in expressing him or herself simultaneously in 2 realms. Again, how do we exist in the very real 3D and be present, be here, be part of this time wave that is unfolding and oscillating, while also existing in a place of unification, in a state of being that would be considered 5D, for instance? How do we do that? This is that first moment that we feel within ourselves and our subjective experience what that's actually like. Again, we have to invest ourselves into the sextile, right? There has to be an actual investment into the reconciliation in order to get that harmony and to open all directions to us. And how do we exist simultaneously within a very real experience of the cosmic egg breaking open? So that's the breaking open of the shell, or the tower just being crumbling, but at the same time the new thing emerging out of it, whatever it is. And so again, we have to be able to exist in both of those places at once and be present, which is the starseeds. It is the starseeds mission. It is what we're here to do. We're not here to exclusively exist in the 5D state of being without being part of the transition process through the 3D. It's just what it is. And the Lightworker mission is part of that as well. Much more rooted in the 3D, because Lightworkers are old Earth souls that resonate with the Starseed mission, but are also very, very capable of being part of what's happening here in a very material way, because it's what their soul knows. It knows the natural progression, the natural evolution, the signature of the material and the planet, right? And so this planet in particular. So again, we can invest ourselves into this process of what Saturn represents, but and being able to find ourselves existing in two places at once, with the crumbling of the shell and the emergence of the new at the very same time, something that we can embody within ourselves, right? In terms of a subjective and emotional experience. We're talking about the water. The moon represents that part of ourselves. So the water that we saw in the reading, that is so important to know that we have all that we need. It's encased within us, and it's so powerful, and we have to be able to identify what's going away and be part of the crumbling, as well as be part of where we're going very consciously. Otherwise, again, we get caught up in where K2 is, the problem, reaction, solution, and we believe what is being presented to us as a solution, and as part of the collective paradigm that we all can get behind. Ooh, boy, Project Bluebeam again comes to mind very, very strongly. And Mars is going to trine Jupiter. As we talked about, Mars at Spica is now trine in a direct Jupiter, right? Jupiter is the lawyer, the benefactor, the expanding now outside of us, all of the opportunities and resources in order to train us. Every opportunity is there's every opportunity provided to us by Jupiter, and we're constantly faced with situations that are training situations that give us the self-discipline to utilize the powerful life energies that we have access to with Aquarius, right? So we learn to discipline our natural impulses and use them for a purpose more than just ourselves, right? Jupiter is now direct. And so all of that expansion, all of those resources, all of those situations that are really training situations are now going to be expanded upon and brought forward in terms of our outside experiences. It's not going to be just within us now. We're going to be faced with situations on the outside in our life that, if not already, they are going to give us proper training to discipline these natural impulses that are more than for just what we individually want in that moment to feel comfortable. And Mars is in conjunction with Spica is able to utilize and act on these resources that are being presented to us, based on everything that we have labored and is being brought forward. And again, the Spica starseeds can be really useful in this process, as long as they are themselves not being too hasty. But I think if you're really very strongly connected to that part of yourself, if you are a Spica starseed, there is a patience that is naturally, something that you're naturally able to connect to as a Spica starseed, because you don't get the wealth, the riches, the resources of your own labor without the process of going through it. And so there's a natural patience that is inherent with the Spica starseeds to not act until it's absolutely time to act, because you don't want to harvest too soon. You don't want to harvest before it's ready, before it's ripe, right? That's a big part of what this is about too, is having the patience and not to act too hasty. And there will be things presented to us that will have us acting hastily, or believing something is happening when maybe it's not. So let's see what else we have today. I feel like that's Venus. Yeah, we're going to talk about Venus. So this degree of Sagittarius is, number one, going to be the degree of the solar eclipse in December. It's a widow's past is brought to light. So, whoo boy, the karma of past actions as it affects opportunities presented by a new cycle. Now, Chiron is also in a degree that has to do with a new cycle and revising our attitude based on old images, giving new symbolic meaning as we come into a new cycle. We are coming into a new cycle. Jupiter and Jupiter and Mercury stationing direct today. We're about to hit the full moon on Wednesday, right? We are coming, and the moon in Aries does represent some measure of new cycle within us, right? And so, but Venus is about our relationships. It is about the material world that is palpable to us. It is about what and who we value. It is about tradition. A widow's past is brought to light. So once a cycle is concluded, much that was unclear or unconsciously motivating us is now more easily seen by the conscious mind. Okay, so there are things coming to light now, and the new day may be found loaded and darkened by unfinished business. So whatever is coming forward in this moment that is going to be expressed very very materially, very much through our physical senses, right? And that's a lot of different senses that we, think about the 5 physical senses, which is very interesting because Venus she makes a 5-pointed star in her transit through an entire cycle, is important. So we're considered to have 5 senses, 5 physical material senses. She rules those senses, right? And to a certain extent, we can develop more of a more sense, right, in an intuitive way. But that's more of the moon to give us that 6th sense, I guess you could consider it. But something's getting brought forward today that is been unclear, or has been unconscious and has to be dealt with in order to move successfully into the next cycle. And Chiron is really going to make this difficult because we are going to be triggered into wounding of self and victimhood with these old cycles. And I think that and old patterns and old ways of doing things. And I think many people are going to find themselves really struggling with this, and this will become even more clear with the full moon, right? Because what is unconscious, what is buried deep within that we don't really see clearly, is going to come to light with the full moon. And we're going to have to get real with ourselves to a certain extent and see what has been unconsciously motivating us at this like collective level that's going to come through all the things and all the people that we value and through our 5 senses today. So just and there could be anger, right? There could be a serious experience of anger and frustration that, again, we saw in the reading. If we are hasty, if we allow ourselves to be moved around by this fire and the discomfort that goes along with this process, we may jump the gun, so to speak. So there's this is going to be aggravated in some ways by Mercury moving direct and Jupiter now moving direct. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, okay? So think about going direct. What is it expanding upon in terms of the collective value system is really going to be a moment of retribution that is inevitable when cycles move and change over. So a lot that's coming up today. Of course, there is a very important lawsuit that was scheduled for today. I don't know if it's still scheduled now for today or not, against a private citizen whistleblower who is suing Dominion directly, and today was the day that the court date. So I don't know if it's still happening or if they've moved it. I'm gonna have to, and maybe somebody on the chat knows for sure what the case is, but it's 12 to 13 degrees of Sagittarius. So technically 12, we're in 12 to 13, that window right now of Sagittarius. And living that polarity is definitely not easy. So I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, so let's move on to the last piece here that I want to show you. Speaking of the desire of nations. So this particular constellation is traditionally called, here, let's look at it actually real quick. It's traditionally called Coma Berenices, right? But if you see here, it's sandwiched between Ursa Major and Virgo, and it really does represent the desire of all nations, because we're looking at the Holy Ghost, right? We're looking at Horus. We're looking at Jesus. We're looking at the Christ, right? We're looking at the child with the Virgin Mother, whatever, however you want to interpret that, you know. And I'm not here to advocate any religious perspective or belief system. That is for all of us to determine on our own. I'm here to give you information and dots to connect if you so desire, and facts. This is one of the stars in this constellation. One of the brightest ones is where Mercury is right now, right? Mercury that represents the twins, right? Mercury that represents not only Gemini, but Virgo as well. Mercury that is able to span the dialectic without attaching to either. Mercury that's able to analyze knowledge and apply it to a very fundamental, very material, very real process of surrendering to oneself. And the Virgin, or the Vestal Virgin, or the Maid in the Virgo constellation often, you know, gets interpreted as being a virgin, like not having any kind of sexual contact in order to bring about this child. But it's really that the purity comes from not being owned by anything, right? And the Vestal Virgins in the temple of Vesta, or Hera, not Hera, sorry, Vesta, is they were owned by no other. They were owned by no one. They had no other responsibilities other than to be of service to their community, to the collective, to their particular collection of where they live, right, wherever their temple was. And so that was their focus. And so the Virgin, or the Virgo archetype, is the purification of the self, right, where you are going through, you're surrendering to yourself to do the work or the labor in order to purify oneself. And when you do that, you take the knowledge or the gnosis from the Gemini aspect, right? The knowledge, the light, so to speak, consciousness, and it is applied to a very real vessel that is then takes that knowledge, use it to purify oneself, to discipline oneself, to surrender to oneself, to be able to come out of it as an agent of service to the social context, whatever that means to you. Then what is brought forward is the seed of the new cycle, the desire of nations, the Holy Ghost, the child, whatever. And this is where Mercury is in conjunction with the star Diademus, right? To sacrifice oneself. And Virgo, again, there is a sense of sacrifice, because when you harvest something, the plant is sacrificing its fruit. It's the head of the grain, the fruit of the grain, whatever. It's sacrificing it in order to not only provide nourishment to those in the natural world, but it also releases the seed for the next cycle. So this is where Mercury is right now, about to station direct. So for whatever comes about through the realm of communication, through the application of our knowledge that needs to be birthed through a canal in some ways, and the struggle that we go, that is part of that process, just keep in mind that what's coming through, as painful as it is, as much labor is part of the process, what is coming out is what's desired, and is the pinnacle, right, of what we're here to do and what we're here to bring about. And what that is again, depends a lot on our own personal action, our own work, our own faith, our own prayer, whatever it is, our own action and our own will coming forward. And it's all about free will and our own choice of where we're going to align on the unfolding of this timeline. It's going to make a big difference on how we experience it. So, but there's certainly going to be some challenges, and there's some labor, and you don't birth anything new without some measure of sacrifice of self or labor. And this is where Mercury is right now. So again, it'll be communicated to us. It will be the knowledge and the information will be moved, right? Transfigured in some ways. But it'll come through Venus, and Venus is our five senses, our material reality, what and who we value. And there will be retribution involved in this. There will be something brought to light as a result of what is being birthed right now that is going to need to be resolved if we are going to actually start the new cycle with a clean slate. And it's painful and it's hard, and we want to just get through the hard parts so that we can be on the other side of it. And I know that many people are bypassing this experience because of that. And it's really important that when you're faced with when you're faced with something that you can't get up and around, right? Saturn, that we are not hasty with our actions or our decision making, and we are very methodical, and that we are very awake and measure twice and cut once, right? Because once the process is started, there's no stopping it, right? You can't just shove it back in there. That's kind of gross, but you know what I mean. You got to trust the natural process as it unfolds, right? That's really... apparently I'm the midwife of New Earth, so that's what it is. I'm here to be part of this process and to guide you through it and to let you know that it's going to be okay, but I can't take away the pain of the process, because that's part of it. That's part of the labor. So interesting, a lot of interesting dots today. That's all I'm going to say about that. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for just being part of this process. I know it's not perfect, and everything, the technical difficulties, the new location for now, at least until I have heat in my office. And honestly, I'd rather just sit by the wood stove anyway. As long as you guys don't mind, I don't mind either. So if you're interested in a reading for how the rest of your 2021 is going to go, an astrological reading, you can book through Catalyst Energies. That's in the description box below. You can also just email me from the email in the description box that says, how does it end? You can say in the subject line, how does it end? And then we can get that. It's $99. And we look from the full moon all the way to the end of 2021 to see what areas of your life are getting impacted. Maybe if there are any starseed markings, anything like that, how the lunar transits, how the eclipses, all of that is going to impact you. So you can book that up until Wednesday for that $99 at least. And any other service that you're interested in, I'll be doing lots of Reiki this week. So if you're interested in Reiki, and you want to mix it together, I would do the same rate and do an hour of Reiki and a smaller astrological reading if that's something that interests you as well. So, and I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. I am going to be offering subscription service through Subscribestar again, and some added bonuses for subscribers, mostly just like a weekly Zoom chat, or we do a class, an astrology class, or we do like a weekly check-in with each other and actually chat and like get deeper into some of the starseed stuff that I can't do or have time to go into in these transmissions. So keep an eye out for that, and let me know how you're doing in the comments. I love reading your comments. So, and obviously you can hook up on social media, Telegram and Facebook, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Have a great day. Do your best, okay? And I love you. I'll see you tomorrow.